Hi everyone, it's Janet and welcome to my channel. Well, if you're a card maker, and I assume you are if you are here, you know that the Slimline cards have become super popular recently. And they're really cool because they're narrow and long, and there's a lot of real estate to work on when you're making these cards. One challenge with them though is finding an envelope to fit. Now, it's true that these will fit in a standard number 10 business envelope. This is the kind that you use typically for business correspondence. It will fit, it will work, but most envelopes that you'll buy for that purpose, they're not the nicest of paper, and it's not a heavy paper. So, it's understandable because it's meant for business correspondence, but I don't really feel that that is acceptable for a pretty card that I've worked a lot of time on. So what I wanted to do was make an envelope myself to fit this. So I went to YouTube. There are plenty of instructions on how to make these manually, but I wanted to make one electronically so that I could quick cut one and get nice rounded flaps, for example. I also wanted my seams to match in the middle like this, and the point of my flaps to match. And so I just decided I didn't like any of the manual patterns that I could find. Now, I'm using Silhouette Designer Edition. I also upgraded recently to the Business Edition, but really there's no difference in what I'm going to show you, I don't think, in how to design this between Business Edition and Designer Edition. However, you may have a problem if you're using the free version of the Silhouette Studio software. There may be some things I'm doing here that might not work on that. You might want to consider upgrading just because there's so much more flexibility and functionality with the Designer Edition. It's probably worth it if you're doing your own designs at all. If you want to do something more complex, you may need to upgrade. So anyway, now that I've said all of that, let's get into designing this card, and I think you'll find that it's a really good lesson. Even if you don't need this style of envelope, you'll learn a few things about how to manipulate Design Studio to do things that you want it to do, to create shapes that you'll then later cut out. So let's get started. All right, to start this envelope, I'm going to change some of my page setup options. First thing I will do is change my transparency from 0% to 32%. This shows me a little bit of the grid below, which helps me keep track of where I am in my measurements without it being overwhelming. Then I'm going to click on Grid Settings. I'm going to choose to make sure Snap to Grid is on, Show Grid, Show Guides, Snap to Guidelines, all those are on. Then spacing should be 1 inch, and divisions I'm going to change from 4 to 2. That is going to make every square here 1/2 inch dimension. Now I can start building my envelope, and I'm going to build it as if it's actually shut. And when I'm all done with that, I will open it up, and this will form the actual template for the cut file. So to do so, I'm going to start with a simple rectangle. I'm going to put it at the 3 and 2 inch mark here and make it 4 inches wide by 9 inches tall. All right, then I'm going to put in a guideline. This is in the center of my rectangle. And just to make sure that I know it's different from a cut line, I'm going to change the color to purple. And now I can tell exactly anywhere on this rectangle where the middle is. And this is going to become important when I'm designing the flaps. So speaking of the flaps, let's start doing those. I'm going to make the left flap first by choosing another rectangle, and I'm going to make this one 2 inches by 9 inches. Then I'm going to do the right flap and make it 2.5 by 9 inches. So now when these are folded, I'll fold the right one first and then the left one, and when I do so, I'm going to have a seam right in the middle. And I'll show you that a little more clearly by coloring these. So here's the right, I don't want to color my line, I want to fill it in with blue. And then on the left side, we're going to fill it in with green. So if I were to fold this with the left one in first and the right one over the top, you'll see that my seam doesn't line up in the center. However, if I do the opposite, where I fold the right one in first, which is a little bit bigger, you see how that's a little bit bigger? I can put the glue line right here, fold the left flap over, and that will make my seam be exactly in the center, which is what I want. That's the neatest look. So now I need to create some wedge shapes at the top and bottom of each of my flaps so they fold nicely. This is relatively easy to accomplish. I'm going to choose the edit points, and I'm going to choose the left flap first and choose that corner point. Make sure it's red, because that's when you know it's going to actually work for you. And I'm going to pull it down twice, which is going to be 1 inch. I'm going to do the same at the bottom, except instead of pulling it down 1 inch, I'm going to pull it up 1/2 inch. Similarly, I'll take the right one, make sure that line is red, and bring it down 2 times. And now at the bottom, bring it up 1 time. So you can see I have a little bit of a problem at this point, because although my seam is in the center, the intersection of this that creates this point is not. It's slightly to the left. I want this point to be actually here. So I've still got my edit points on. I'm going to select my right flap, and I'm going to go and turn off my snap to grid, because otherwise I won't be able to manipulate this exactly where I want it to be. And I'm going to press my shift key down, grab that corner, and pull it down until it meets exactly in the center. And now that point is in the middle along with the seam. Similarly, we'll go down to the bottom, click that edge, push down my shift key, and move that up. That also now is meeting in the middle where I want it to. Come out a little bit more so you can see this again. I'm now ready to make my flaps. So I'm going to turn on my snap to grid line again. And then I'm going to choose this wedge. There's probably more elegant ways to do this, but this is how I do it. So I'm going to make this wedge shape here. This is the right side of my flap. I'm going to choose duplicate, and then I'm going to actually do a, I need to reselect this, I guess. Yes. And then I'm going to flip it horizontally. And I can bring that up. So you can see now I've got my right flap and my left flap, but I have nothing in the middle. So I need to create a rectangle to go in the middle there. All right, now I have to weld this together to make one continuous piece, but in order to do that, I've got to get this little rectangle to overlap just slightly on the left and right side so that they cross into these wedge shapes. It's real easy to do this. I'm just going to make sure that that rectangle is chosen, go up here to the width, and I'm going to type 1.01. And that should do it for me. So now I'm going to hit the shift key and click on the wedges, go over to the modify panel and choose weld. And now you see that I've got a flap that's going to come down, and there's plenty of room here for my glue line. Now I'm going to do the bottom one. So I'm going to duplicate this top one, and then I'm going to flip it this time vertically, and I can move this, grab the wrong one, undo. I can move this down to the bottom. Now I don't want this to be that tall, however. It's not going to put it exactly where I want it to be, so I'm going to force it. And I want this to be at the 11-inch mark, so I'm going to put it up here and change it to 11. You know, I'm just going to take off the snap to grid here, make it easier on myself, and move it right there. Now I can just make sure that I'm exactly on the 3-inch mark here, so it's even with this. It's at 3.012. I'm going to change that to 3. Now I know that it's flush against the left, which is what I want. So now you can see I have a nice little envelope. I'm going to change the whole thing and fill it with white now. It will look better. There, you see? So that's a perfect envelope when it's shut. I'm going to go ahead and delete my guideline now. Don't need that anymore. And now I'm going to open this all up so we can actually get a cut file that we can use to create an envelope. But this is how it's going to look when it's folded shut, so that's good to know. The first thing I'm going to do is start opening it by working with this top one. And I'm going to right click and click, I think it's vertical. And let's make sure that my snap to grid is on again, because if it is, it's going to move up here a lot easier for me. Do the same thing here, flip vertically. Because I manipulated this again, when snap to grid was off, it's not going to align for me on the even 1/2 inch marks. But I can fix this. I know I need the top of this to be at 11 inches, so I'm just going to change that position to 11 and verify again that the X position, the left side, is at 3. It is, so we're all good there. Now I can flip my right one out, and I'm going to choose flip horizontally. Move this out. And here's my left flap, flip horizontally, and move this out. Oh, I grabbed the wrong thing. That happens. There we go. I can see something is a little funky here. There's a space, and I need this to be exactly flush. So the easiest way to do this is, I know this is the 7-inch line. I'm just going to choose this and tell it that the position is at 7 inches. Now it is nice and flush. Let's check the other corners to make sure they are flush as well. Should be good. It's always worthwhile to check it. They all look good. Excellent. Now I want to get to the point where I can weld this to make a continuous piece. But in order to do it, I first need to make sure that I've retained this middle rectangle so that we can use it as a score line. The easiest way to do this, I find, is to click the layers panel and choose the bottom rectangle. That's going to be the first shape you made, which is at the bottom. I'm going to duplicate it by pressing on those double blocks and grab it. Sometimes hard to grab them for some reason, but grab that. Now this is going to become our fold line eventually. We're going to leave it off here to the side though. Let's go back to this shape. Let's hit the layers panel, make sure that rectangle is chosen again. Now we need to make this slightly taller and slightly wider so that it will overlap all the flaps, and therefore it will weld as one continuous piece again. So I'm going to choose this width to be 4.01, enter, and the height to be 9.01, enter. And let's choose that again and double check my measurements, and it looks good. So now I can do this boundary box, choose the modify, and weld. And there you go. You have one continuous piece now. What's missing, however, are your fold lines, but that's what we saved this for. And I'm going to change the line on this one now to be blue so that it's different. And I want to also make sure my snap to grid is on, and it is. I can move this over, and it is now in place. And we can look at this a little bit closer. You can see the intersection is good here. We're in pretty darn good shape. All right, so now we can go ahead and cut this. Now to cut this, I'm going to hit the send button. And I've got it defaulted right now. It's going to say it's plain cardstock for both the red and the blue line. Now when you open yours, it may be on fill, it might be on layer. Just choose the line and you'll see the red and blue lines. The red are cut, the blue are score. But you have to tell it to do that. So in my case, it already knows that because I've done this a few times. But you'll want to make sure your cardstock, your material is set to whatever kind of material you are using. And in my case, I have a Silhouette 4, so it's going to auto cut it with the settings that it already does for plain cardstock, which is down here. It's going to be a 3 depth, force of 20, and a speed of 4. Then we need to click on the blue line section, and I need to change or make sure that it is set for score versus cut. If yours says cut, you need to change it to score. And you can see it automatically, at least for me, because I have the 4, changed my depth to 1 and the force to 15. And so now it's going to cut the red out, and it's going to score where the blue lines are and make a perfect little envelope for me. So I'm going to go ahead and send this, and then I'll show you what I got as a result. All right, so here is the cut that I made with the pattern that we did together. Just going to take this off the mat, and it looks pretty good. Now when you fold something that you've made on the Silhouette and it's actually, you know, cut that score line a little bit, your bend needs to be where that slit happened. Otherwise you're not going to get a very nice fold. So I'm going to use this. Fold that over and fold this over. Looks pretty good. Now I'm going to use some art glitter glue here for my glue lines. So you want the left one down first, and this is where that glue line is going to go for the middle. Push that down. So as you can see, that point when you fold the flaps over is perfectly in the center, and also down here at the bottom. And there's enough room at the bottom that I can put a glue line on this flap and shut that up as well. And so there you have it. Now of course, once you put your card in, you can seal it up with wet glue, or you could put like a double-sided adhesive where you would peel away the covering on that when you're ready to mail it. That would work too. So let's look at a card. This is a Slimline card that I made, and Slimline, the standard size really for card makers is 3.5 inches wide by 8.5 inches tall, which is what I designed this for. So if we put that in here, you'll see it fits just perfectly. We'll glue that down and you have your envelope. So I hope you found this useful. Thanks for joining me. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Do subscribe if you haven't already. And I've got some more videos right after this that you may be interested in seeing if you like this one. So again, thank you, and I'll be back soon with another video.